All right now, let's jump into some Cavs. And do we have a special guest for you? From FoxSportsOhio.com. He knows everything about the Cleveland Cavaliers. This is Sam Amico. Sam, how you doing?
Guys, I'm doing well. I don't know if I know everything, but I hope to learn.
Oh, stop!
Don't
Don't sell yourself short, buddy.
Sam, everyone thinks that it's going to be the Cavs and the Bulls coming out of the East. What did that preseason game of the Cavs and Bulls show you on how interesting their games could be against each other this year?
Well, I think it showed us that they could probably be pretty intense. Chicago with Derrick Rose is obviously you saw him score 30 points. But frankly, I think Chicago's going to have a hard time keeping up with the Cavs because you're going to have to score 108, 110, and that's not something Chicago's used to. And I think we saw that in that preseason game, with LeBron going about a half speed, maybe even a third speed. It's going to be hard to outscore the Cavs. Chicago's a very defensive-oriented team. But, hey, a team that's a veteran team like Chicago, Washington's kind of become a little more of a veteran team now. They're getting, obviously, the backcourt's young and with Wall and Beal, but their front court's a veteran with Pierce and Nene and Gortat. Those are the type of teams that the Cavaliers in the East are going to have to look out for a little bit. That'll be gunning for them. They're not going to have to worry about the young teams, but those more veteran-laden teams like Chicago and Washington and maybe even now Atlanta. Those teams aren't huge threats, but they're contenders. They're teams that the Cavs got to keep an eye on.
Watching that game, a lot of people have been talking about with the Bulls that Derrick Rose is back. Looks like he's in that MVP type form. I've been pretty hesitant to believe any of that, really, because that preseason game was the only time where I've seen him look kind of like that guy. Do you think Derrick Rose is going to be back to being that superstar caliber point guard?
Well, I'm with you. I think that that's a very small sample size in a meaningless game. Now, he's obviously, I don't know that he has his burst back all the way, but he showed, in 20 to 23 minutes in the preseason that he may be pretty valuable again at the very least. So, I'm not going to say he's all the way back and he's going to be the league MVP or even in the running, but he had his moments for sure in the preseason. Let's not forget, Kyrie Irving beat him out as starting point guard when it really mattered at FIBA, and also scored 28 points in that game against Derrick Rose. Obviously, Derrick Rose was out of the game for when Kyrie scored a lot of his points, but I think you run into trouble when you start anointing people certain things in the preseason. I remember, the Cavs the year after LeBron left in 2010 went 5-2 in the preseason, and then people were like, "Hey, they're going to be all right." Then the real thing comes, and they lose 26 straight. So I wouldn't put too much stock in the preseason. One thing with Derrick Rose that we didn't see in that preseason game that we will in the regular season is Sean Marion and LeBron being up against them, as opposed to just Kyrie, Dion Waiters to keep them out of the paint. So, hey, let's hope he's back for his sake all the way and healthy and can stay healthy. But, it's a long season ahead, and he's coming off 2 major injuries in a row. So we'll see how it goes.
Sam, Spencer Davies here. I would like to gauge your opinion.
Spencer.
Oh, hi. I would like to gauge your opinion on who stood out to you the most in the preseason, besides the guys that are getting the spotlight. Who stood out to you the most?
Well, if you're talking about practice and the game, to me it was Tristan Thompson. He just did a fantastic job. In practice, I mean, he may have even out-rebounded Kevin Love. There was not a rebound that he couldn't get. And in the games, I just thought he's giving them exactly what they want from him when he's getting the minutes. He's giving them 14 points and 11 rebounds, which actually exceeds their expectations. When you're talking about a front court that already has Kevin Love and Anderson Varejao to get all those rebounds, for Tristan to come in and rebound like a madman and be an energy guy. He's had a couple nice block shots in the preseason. He's been, to me, just a huge surprise for them, and just the way he's come around. He's looked very good so far. So, yeah, obviously, you love the LeBrons, the Kevin Loves, the Kyrie Irvings, even Dion Waiters, Anderson Varejao. All those guys are doing their thing. But I just have been surprised and very impressed with how Tristan Thompson has played so far.
Sam, Terry Rabbits here. I got a question for you on the lack of the big three playing together in the preseason. We know that when it comes down to the end of the season, the home field could come down to a game or two between, say, us and Chicago or whoever. Do you think that lack of playing together is going to hurt us in the beginning of the season here?
That could. It could. The lack of familiarity a little bit may, especially now that you're playing games that, are actually count in the standings. It could affect you a little bit. It could impact you. Those three, along with a first-time NBA coach, all that stuff, and not to mention, outside the big three, the guys who have been together, Tristan and Dion and Kyrie. Obviously, those guys are young still, and Matthew Dellavedova, they still have a lot of youth, so they don't have a lot of veteran guys, and the veteran guys they do have are guys who have been around a while, like Mike Miller, Sean Marion. Those guys are going to take some time to adjust next to the big three, too. So, it could cost them a little bit early in the season, but that's okay, as long as it costs you early and not late. And I still think they're going to score 108 points a game. They're still going to be extremely difficult to beat. It's just they may not, instead of beating teams by 16, they may win by 6. So, but I think it could cost them a little bit early on for sure.
Hey, Sam, Ben Jeanette here. Other than Kyrie, LeBron, Kevin Love, and even Dion, who's going to be in the starting lineup, is it going to be Matthew Dellavedova who's going to have to be that scoring option off the bench with that second unit?
Well, I think that they're going to have to find somebody to help out in that department a little bit. I don't think it's going to be, that you're going to have to rely on Matthew Dellavedova or Sean Marion or Tristan to score off the bench. I don't think you're going to have to do that simply because, the rotations probably always going to either include Kyrie or Dion in the backcourt. They'll substitute them in and out. And LeBron may play quite a bit. I think Kyrie's probably going to play 38, 40 minutes a game. So you're always going to have one of those starters, I think, as your scoring option, even if it's just Dion Waiters playing with the second unit for a while, then you put Kyrie back in. The rotations have been very interesting in the preseason, and I suspect they'll stay that way during the regular season, so that you don't have to say, okay, we're going to substitute in 5 guys at a time. Now who's going to score for us? I don't think you'll have that. You'll have that issue. I think that either Kyrie, Dion, or LeBron will always, or maybe Kevin Love will always be in the game at one time or another. At least one of those guys.
Dion Waiters has taken multiple shots and led the team in shot attempts for multiple preseason games. Now, do you think that that's going to carry into the season, or is that going to decrease because some of those games were without LeBron or Kyrie or Love?
Yeah, it'll definitely decrease. There's no question. And that's why, he's not going to lead the team in shots when all 3 of those guys are playing, that's for sure. He'll probably be 4th. He may be 3rd sometimes, but he'll probably be 4th. And I think he knows that. He's aware of that. There was a couple games LeBron didn't play. He kind of mentioned to Dion, you know what, keep the ball moving. You're not just because I'm not out there doesn't mean that you get to fire it away. And during the Dallas game, I saw, you could see out of the floor, LeBron kind of gave him a little bit of a stern talking to, pull him aside. Dion nodded his head. So, the Cavs aren't too worried about it. He's a guy who's entered his 3rd year. He hasn't played with these kind of guys. Here's Dion Waiters, 3rd-year NBA player, 3 different coaches and 3 different styles, and now all of a sudden he's got about 7, 8, 9, 10 new teammates. So he's still learning, and the fact that he has LeBron there, guys like LeBron, he's very close with Kevin Love. I think that'll help him during the regular season in terms of shot selection, and I foresee that vastly improving because of that by January or so.
You know, with the Cavs and the Bulls in the East, do you see another serious Eastern Conference contender other than the Cavs and the Bulls? Indiana would be in there if Paul George would be in the season, but since he's gone, they're going to be struggling to possibly even make the playoffs. Is there another team in the East that can challenge the Bulls and the Cavs?
Well, honestly, I think the Cavs are going to be in the front, and I think second place is coming down to Chicago and Washington. I don't give Chicago that huge of an edge over Washington because, Washington now has playoff experience. John Wall's every bit as fast as Derrick Rose. He's not as explosive finishing, going to the basket, but he's every bit as fast. He values defense. Bradley Beal can fill it up like nobody on the Bulls roster when Bradley Beal's healthy. So, and then you throw in Pierce, who's obviously past his prime, but he's a veteran and he knows how to play at winning time. He's won a title, So, and NA, there's always questions about his durability, but he's very tough. He matches up with Gasol, and obviously Gortat, too, is a nice player for them. So I really think that Chicago and Washington are going to be neck and neck for second place. And I think if Washington gets its act together, the Wizards will be a very dangerous team come playoff time. They don't have the experience that Chicago has in the playoffs, which is why I think in the playoffs, Chicago will be a bigger threat. But I think Washington could get that number 2 seed. Obviously very early. You need Bradley Beal to come back healthy. But I think Washington has a nice team and has added some nice pieces. Pierce and Humphries. Those guys aren't Chris Humphries. Those guys aren't great NBA players, and Pierce, but they're guys who know their role and play hard, especially in the playoffs. So I think that they would be a threat to Chicago for sure. I really look at Atlanta as a sleeper after that playoff run last year. Had a nice series, and frankly, they have all the pieces, and they play that Spurs offense. They were second in the league in assists, and any team that keeps the ball moving like that with a healthy Al Horford this year, they could sweep their way past Chicago or Washington. I don't think they'll get past the Cavs, but they could be a team there that to keep an eye on for sure. I'm not a firm believer in anybody else. I'm not a big believer in Toronto or any of those others. So, the Knicks and that, I don't think those teams are even going to be, any kind of threat. But Chicago, Washington, and on the outside looking in maybe is Atlanta.
Sam, Terry Rabbits again. My question to you is, we've talked about Dellavedova coming off the bench with the second unit. Who do you think is going to be that part of the second unit that's going to provide a spark, do the dirty work, get you the rebounds, play the defense?
Well, that's a good question. Obviously Dellavedova is a big spark plug with the way he plays. He's a very ferocious defender and is all over guys all the time. It irritates him. Last year early on, he and Kyrie are close now, but last year during practice, this kind of thing will happen. Kyrie just shoved him. And then later on, Kyrie was acknowledged. You know what? That guy can frustrate the heck out of you. And it's great. We love having him. So, he's a guy obviously going to do it in the backcourt. I think Sean Marion is really, he's up there in age. He can't jump like he used to, but he does all the intangibles and is a very smart player. So I look for Sean Marion to help because he can rebound. He can defend everything from point guard to power forward. And he's the kind of guy who just makes the winning plays and does the intangibles, and he's a veteran. So in the backcourt, I'd say Dellavedova, and in the front court, obviously Sean Marion. If Tristan Thompson keeps coming off the bench, the way he's played, I think you got to throw him in that conversation too.
You talk about frustration. Tell me how frustrating it would be for an opponent to take on a lineup in a bench bunch of Matthew Dellavedova, Anderson Varejao, or Tristan Thompson, and Louis Amundsen. How?
That would be, those guys you just talked about are what? They're all energy guys, and you hate playing against guys like that because, you know what? Skill-wise, maybe they don't have NBA skills that are going to knock you out. So you're not afraid of these guys. You think, I'm going to take this guy in the basket easy, and I'm going to beat him easy. And then they're fouling you, and they're all over you, and they come in for 20 minutes a game and go all out. They're all over you. Yeah, all those guys you mentioned are very frustrating guys to have to play against because they play with a high degree of energy, and they're great compliments to the stars that the Cavs have, the scoring stars. You hate playing against stars, but you really hate going against these guys because you don't expect them to be any good, and it turns out they are.
All right, Sam, one last question here. Do you see the Cavs making the finals? And if they do, are they playing the Spurs again, or are they playing the Spurs, and is somebody else coming out of the West?
I think the Cavaliers, all things with they stay healthy, relatively healthy. They don't get worn out too many minutes during the regular season. I think it's important to keep LeBron rested during the regular season. You can play Kyrie and Dion and Tristan and those young guys. You can play them 40 minutes if you want to, but I think the vets you got to keep them rested. But I think they will get to the final simply because they have the coach now. The coach that they have is a guy who can make this work. We've seen the ball movement in the preseason. Nobody's taken more than 2 dribbles. Maybe Dion gets carried away sometimes, but that'll change come playoffs. So I don't think anybody in the East is going to get past this team in the playoffs. Out West, the Spurs are never the pick. How often do we say, yeah, it's going to be the Spurs? We never do that. Maybe you did before the season last year, Spencer, but national media, the Spurs just aren't a sexy pick. So could they do it? Absolutely. I'm not going to be the guy to doubt the Spurs, but I think the Clippers, they just have so many weapons now with the addition of Spencer Hawes. And you look at their bench, Jamal Crawford, Glenn Davis, their starting lineup with Chris Paul, who in my opinion is the best point guard in the league still, Blake Griffin, and some of those other pieces that they have. I think it's going to be a Cavs-Clippers finals. And hey, if the Spurs prove me wrong, then I'm sure they'll prove a lot of other people wrong. But and if that's the case, I think if the Cavs have to play the Spurs, they'd be in trouble. I really do, because the Spurs, if they get there, if they're good enough and healthy enough to get there, then you're in trouble. But if they play the Clippers, if the Cavaliers play the Clippers or the Thunder or some other team out west that manages to get there, the Rockets, I think they've got a good shot at winning it all.
All right, Sam, thank you so much. It was awesome having you on today. Hope to have you on more during the season. Thanks for being on the show.
Great insight, my man.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, guys, and I'll come on anytime, even if Spencer's there.
All right, thanks, Sam.
All right. Take care, guys.
That was Sam Amico from FoxSports.com.